Welcome to Ask AI, the podcast that brings you insightful interviews and news from the world of Canadian artificial intelligence. This episode is sponsored by Microsoft Canada. Microsoft is committed to building trusted and responsible AI systems. To learn more, go to microsoft.com/AI and check out their free AI business school to start building intelligence into your solutions today. We're also sponsored by Cinchi, the global leader in data fabric technology. Visit Cinchi.com to learn how to eliminate integration and turbocharge your AI transformation.
Hello there, AI enthusiasts, and welcome to another episode of the Ask AI podcast. My name is Jaxson Khan, and today I'll be your host. Today, we're really looking forward to interviewing Dr. Lawrence Richard, who is a professor in the Department of Pediatrics, the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Alberta. He is also a practicing pediatric neurologist. He serves as the Vice Dean of Research politically for the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry. He's the Center Director of the Northern Alberta Clinical Trials and Research Center. And he's also the academic lead for Precision Health Signature Area. In his leadership roles, Lawrence is committed to maximizing the use of health data to improve patient outcomes through research, to enhancing the support for innovation in clinical research. He also focuses on the application of precision health in pediatric autonomic disorders and the treatment of pediatric migraines. He holds the Alberta Health Services Chair in Health Informatics Research used to support the creation of the real-world evidence unit and to enhance the support for applications of data science in health. Wow. Welcome to Ask AI, Lawrence.
Thank you, Jaxson. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're so happy to have you. And, typically I always start with the basic, the easy question, what has been your journey so far? And how did you start to maybe have AI become a part of your work?
I'll tell you a little story. I've always been fascinated by the applications of health informatics, computers, information systems in health. And, as I'm sure everyone here knows, the health sector is kind of a slow adopter to innovations like that. But through residency, I was fascinated by it. I played with databases. I built databases for my supervisors and stuff. And at one point, my senior resident told me, he said, Lawrence, if you spent as much time, on pediatric neurology as you did on those other things, you'd be a much better resident. So my journey starts with, I don't want to say I'm a bad physician. I think I'm an okay physician, but I do love thinking about, how our craft, our profession could be better if we leverage tools, including AI.
I think that's fantastic. And, there are so many great things that have come about in the world, particularly I feel like, in the context of health and sciences, just from folks being curious. I think it's wonderful to begin to research that and think about it and incorporate into some of your work. So that's so cool. And Lawrence, specifically in terms of the work that you're doing now, could you describe your role at the University of Alberta in more detail?
Sure. So I serve as Vice Dean Research and for the clinical parts of the research umbrella. And under that umbrella, we're really, really, really focused on trying to make better use of health data in the context of research and its application in improving care for patients. And, we have at the university kind of a privileged access through research to population health data. And, we've used that data over time, using traditional methods. But what's changing today is the velocity of data that's being created from whether it be digital imaging, whether it be the digitization of the electronic medical record. What we're seeing is more and more data is increasingly available, but the tools to use it are not the traditional tools. We really need to partner with experts outside of health, outside of statistics, traditional statistics, AI scientists, machine learning specialists. We really need to partner with people with different skill sets from different realms, different backgrounds to make use of this data, whether it be, natural language processing because all the data is unstructured, whether it be, image analysis and digital sight, as it were, that the tools needed to make use of this data with the ultimate goal of improving the way we provide care are just require a multidisciplinary approach. So in my leadership role, really the focus is how do we build those bridges? How do we build those ties? I'm gone is the day that an individual person, like myself, with any amount of training could cover it all. right? I mean, for myself to be a clinician, an expert in, leadership and an expert in health data, and then also an expert in artificial intelligence and machine learning, is just an impossible task. So really it was about creating the bridges with the other faculties in science, the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. And so that's really been the focus of my leadership role. But also, I mean, I think the opportunity we have is to build infrastructure that makes it easier for people to work together. And that could be physical infrastructure, that could be hiring. And so we've focused on both of those. We've built some physical infrastructure under the guise of a much more secure data center. And that has helped enable the use of data that otherwise would have been hard for our health system partners to share. But they were reassured that, the heavy lifting of the security, whether it be technical, administrative, or otherwise, had been addressed to their satisfaction. So that's one area of focus in trying to invest in the infrastructure that helps support this work, but also just in the capacity. I mean, I speak clinician, I speak medicine. I understand AI, but I don't speak AI, so to speak. My partners in who are world experts in artificial intelligence, they speak AI and they understand medicine, and we need more opportunities to bump together. So we've done some engagement activities and done some collaborative presentations, a lot of committee work together just to try to bridge those gaps, but also realized we needed to hire people who could help bridge that gap. So we've also been pursuing that, and there'll be some announcements soon at the University of Alberta about a recent hire that we've been able to attract back to Canada. So,
hey, that sounds really exciting. We'll have to stay tuned to hear who that may be. Lawrence, I mean, wonderful to hear about all of the advancements, all of the investments happening in U of A. And do you feel like there is already an impact that is having on the university's research agenda, particularly when it comes to incorporating AI and ML into that process?
I think so. I mean, the level of interest is remarkable. The fact that people are seeing opportunities to collaborate, clinicians, are seeing opportunities to connect with people they otherwise may not have been able to find. And that, that part I'm proud of. I wouldn't say we're done. We're nowhere near done, but that part I'm proud of. And, when a clinician comes and says, what if we could do this? And I can actually say, you need to talk to so-and-so, and, we've got some funds to support you, and we've got some infrastructure to back you up. And wouldn't it be nice if you got going on this in short order rather than 3 years from now? That's the kind of thing we're starting to see more of. And it's the escalation of that I really like to see happen over the next few years. But the base is there. And I think I'm really excited to see the next 3 to 5 years as to what happens.
That's exciting. I definitely am too. And, I'm so glad that much of this innovation is Canadian homegrown. It's really exciting to see. Just want to ask you, maybe a couple tactical questions about, particularly at U of A, how this might look. And, for example, I'm interested, how are research projects prioritized right now, particularly if they involve a significant amount of AI work or data science?
Well, that's a great question. You could start with the utopian, wouldn't it be nice if, and then there's reality. I mean,
yeah, I mean, obviously, it'd be amazing if everyone had, perfect infrastructure and all the resources and capacity. But yeah, just intrigued, you mentioned some of those investments in that infrastructure, and wondering how that might get prioritized, because I imagine that lots of folks might want to use those resources, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are some amazing opportunities in Alberta. It's, for those who may not know, the health system is an integrated health system. So there's one single health provider, Alberta Health Services. And that level of integration has resulted in a very significant IT integration, which is just an opportunity ripe for the picking. But the other thing that Alberta Health Services has done is try to create a bit of a push-pull model, if you will, that, they are starting to define their own priorities. Starting to say out loud, wouldn't it be nice if you worked on these kinds of things? Because these are our pain points. And so that's really important. And that's happening. It doesn't happen, as much as we might dream it could and it should, but that's happening. And so that's the sort of utopian. That should be the way projects are defined. They should be defined by need, by impact, and having patients weigh in on this. That's the other thing we're seeing more of is patients telling us, through efforts like the strategy for patient-oriented research, patients are telling us, here's my pain points, here's the problems I'd like to see solved. And that's an important element. But the reality is funding drives a lot of these activities, right? And so the availability of data is a key driver that defines the success or failure of a project. And that's still a reality today. I would say the health system has very interesting data, and we haven't used it to its full advantage, but it's also missing a bunch of data we need to make a difference. Like that individual level outcome data, how after a patient receives a treatment, how did they do is a question that we have trouble asking or answering. And, so there's data we're not collecting that we also need to collect. And we also need to look at data that's outside the health sector. I mean, there's so many aspects of health are defined by environmental exposures, socioeconomic status, rural or urban setting. I mean, there's a whole number of factors that we need to look outside the health sector for. And we're just, starting to, touch on access to that kind of data. So access to data is a big one. So we've seen projects, some of the more successful projects have been in imaging, not surprisingly, because that's where there's volumes and volumes and terabytes of data. And so, yes, we should use it, and we should see what we can learn from that. And there's been some very interesting, innovative companies that have come out of those projects that I can speak about peripherally, but that I have seen is a real, the impact on imaging is palpable, right? It's real. We're starting to see applications, potential applications being deployed in the health sector that just make physicians, interpreters of diagnostic images better at what they do. And
that's very interesting. I'm wondering, for the audience, would you be able to maybe talk about a specific project and what were some of the techniques they used to collect that data for the AI models?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the applications that I as a clinician feel most passionate about is where AI steps in to make you better at what you do. I mean, we all love tools that make us better at what we do. And certainly in the imaging space, that's an opportunity that is very real, where the failings of the human brain can be compensated for. those mental judgments, those errors, those distractions that happen to humans can be compensated for by having tools, AI tools in the background, looking at images, if you will, with you. And so if you just take very routine example. I'll give you two, maybe. One is the use of a standard MRI or CT scan of the head. And so that my area is neurology, so that's going to be my focus. But if you were to take the context of multiple sclerosis, for example, where the imaging is used to track disease progress, it's used to track treatment efficacy, and getting an accurate assessment of how one MRI compares to the last MRI is really important. And that's an area where AI applied to diagnostic imaging can be really helpful in not missing any of the white spots, so to speak, accurately calculating the volume of burden of disease in an image like that. So there's one example. This one, the second one hasn't come to fruition yet, but I'm really keen to see it, is a researcher who's gotten access to the printed record of millions of electrocardiograms. And what she is using computer vision to look at the images of the electrocardiogram, to categorize them, and then associate that with data about those individuals in terms of their health status and other things. And that's going to be really interesting work. If you just think of the reams and reams and reams of electrocardiograms that must be interpreted on a daily basis. I mean, there's a tool, imagine a tool that could look not only at the electrocardiogram, but take into account the patient's age, sex, and other factors in interpreting the EKG. Now you've kind of augmented what a computer can do in assisting that process. So those are just two examples. And then the last one that I really think is, it is getting the non-expert to be better at what they do. And maybe you've interviewed this person, but I won't claim his technology, but Mito AI is working on technology that essentially would allow non-expert practitioners to use ultrasound effectively in an acute setting. So, if you come to the emergency room at the Stolly Children's Hospital, you get an expert ultrasonographer interpreting your ultrasound to see whether you have appendicitis or not. That's great. But what if you're way up north, right? And the only person available to you is a nurse practitioner who isn't an expert in ultrasonography, but it's the only clinician available to you within thousands of miles. Wouldn't it be good if AI could be used to allow that practitioner to use the technology and be somewhat confident in saying, I think this is real, this is appendicitis, we need to call the transport team and get them here quickly, or not, right? And so that using AI to make the non-expert a better clinician is just, I really think that's an exciting application for the future. And not so much the future, very real today.
Yeah, I think all of the aspects that you mentioned are very true, and really, really exciting set of projects there. I love the last one in terms of, how do we help the non-expert understand better? How can we help remote communities more effectively? When you were speaking to the ECGs, the EKGs, I had a bit of a flashback to my grandfather's cardiologist. And so I always remember him out taking a look at those. So, maybe if that process was augmented or, was sped up for the ones that were, had 99% confidence or something like that, could have been amazing to maybe help more people faster. So
yeah,
really, really exciting. Quick switch of gears for you. Wondering if there are any big ethical challenges that you see right now with the application of AI in your research.
Yeah, I think, I think we need to be mindful. It's probably certainly not new to your audience that, that the algorithms that we derive from the data we have are only as good as the data we have. And we need to be mindful of how that data is collected. That's not a new problem. I mean, traditional, data analytics, statistics has always had to be mindful about that, not to overinterpret or underinterpret observations in a data set. But in sort of the unexplainable black box scenario of AI, I know there are alternatives to that. But in that scenario where you're not sure how a model is making decisions, we do need to be mindful because there are numerous examples that I won't try to quote, but where the algorithm is using information that you find a bit surprising as a human being sometimes when we hear how the model's using the data. So that's number one. And I think that goes back to, the health system itself needs to think about the data it's collecting and on whom, right? So who's not in that data needs to be known well. So, that would be one. The other is these tools, these AI-enabled tools are, they're being deployed, from my observation, to a large degree outside of the health system, through apps, through digital devices. And there's only a segment of the population that can benefit from them. So there will be a socioeconomic disparity created if, the person with extra resources and diabetes gets much, much better care than the person without, the digital enablers to manage their diabetes, for example. And so, that's a scenario I think we just need to keep an eye out for. And, reimbursement for these technologies, if they are going to be shown to improve health outcomes, we're going to need to come up with reimbursement models that allow, all segments of our population to benefit.
Yeah, I think I'm really, really interested in that, and, seeing what does it actually look like to do, as equitable research as possible, making sure that various communities, marginalized folks are included in those models as well, rural and remote communities. So yeah, intrigued to learn more about how that might be done. Also curious about, I know there's a lot of great work happening at University of Alberta. There's also great work happening, I'm sure, in other Canadian institutions in the States, all around the world. Do you feel like our universities are doing enough to collaborate on AI research, in your opinion?
Well, it
Or
could be
are
better.
there barriers to that work being done, to
Yeah,
sharing that data?
there are data sharing barriers, certainly, and that, they're not insurmountable. I mean, the whole idea of, federated deployment of models. I'm aware of a project going on at the U of A in collaboration with University of California, San Francisco. I mean, and they are leveraging a federated approach. So the data stays on site, but they're using a federated learning approach. And I don't know the logistics or the technicalities of how they do that, but they feel that they've developed a way to do that. And that's sort of a privacy preserving approach that, we need to embrace where we can. The provincial privacy legislation around health data is a barrier. There's essentially 10 islands of data that is created through this legislation. And we have trouble sharing it across even our own provincial borders. And that's to me is something that, from a policy or legislation perspective, we have to stop talking about changing that. We have to fix that because we're going to leave Canadians behind. But at the same time, I think maybe the universities themselves, I think, could push harder on collaborating outside of their institutions, getting mixed data, for example, from multiple hospitals, is important, right? If we're going to derive algorithms based on this data, but it only comes from one center, you've got a biased data set. And so, if we're going to talk about generalizable applications to Canadians, we're going to have to get over this, this siloing of the data or trying to, derive an algorithm in one center and just hope and pray that it's generalizable to another. Because I think we've learned that they're not. So, that to me is an area where the institutions, the health systems, and the provincial legislators, need to get together and find a solution to this. It's not for lack of trying. I know many, many people are trying. So I don't want to take away if anyone's listening. We're working on these kinds of things. I know lots of people are trying, and I just want to encourage them and hope our decision makers can make it happen.
Me too. I think that opening up more, scientific research, even the journals as well. And in my mind, as a little educated as I am, I imagine the more the better. If the more research, the more data, the more information available, it's going to help us all. So let's see what happens on the part of regulators, gatekeepers. So that was speaking to sort of other universities and collaboration opportunities there. I'm also curious, maybe in your work with the University of Alberta and in the healthcare system, how that AI ecosystem might look. So, for example, maybe there's nonprofit partners or government partners, startups, and other organizations that you work with. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on a steep learning curve myself. I mean, I'm a clinician by training. I'm an academic by accident in some respects, but and here I am immersed in this world just mostly because of my leadership roles, but also my true interest in the area, immersed in an ecosystem that is so diverse. And so my learning curve is that this isn't just about research. This is about innovators. This is about innovative companies. This is about, government stimulating an innovation ecosystem, a digital health ecosystem. And all those actors are trying to find their way. And on top of it, at a pace of change that's unprecedented in the health space, right? I mean, the time to market for a typical new molecule that shall be a drug is, about 14 years. But the pace of change and the volume of change in digital health is just unprecedented. So you've got all these actors in the space: clinicians, decision makers, government, funders, innovators, small companies, large companies, all playing and working in this ecosystem. And I'm learning a ton about what the needs are, what the problems are, and we haven't solved all of those problems. But the ecosystem is rich, and we have to really understand the barriers. If if you're a small company and have no access to data, how are you ever going to prove your device is effective? Or if you need access to patients but don't have the pocket, the bank account of a large pharma company, how do you get out of that? How do you get out of the gates? And so there's lots of problems that need solving. But I think it's really going to take collaborative effort. And I know, Edmonton, University of Alberta, and our ecosystem here generally in Alberta, that those same things are happening in other major cities in Canada for sure. And, it'd probably be useful for us to learn from each other, because that's people who are rubbing elbows really who are unfamiliar with each other's areas of expertise. And I've had to learn to speak a new language about, dilutable revenue versus non-dilutable revenue and things I never thought I needed to know about. But, it matters. And when we talk about innovation, unless it gets in the hands of people who use it, it's not an innovation. So we need companies, we need innovators, we need, students who are going to, bring these things to market. So I don't know, that's a rambling answer to your question, but it is a deep and rich ecosystem. The players are diverse, and I'm sort of drinking from the fire hose, trying to figure out how we can help at least take away some of the barriers for this to work.
Super, super exciting, Lawrence. Hey, we're coming up on time. I just want to ask you one more question. You sound pretty excited about all of the different work, all the various projects happening. And I'm wondering if there's one thing that highlights you in general, a big trend that's happening in AI, machine learning right now, that it is really exciting for you.
Well, the discussion I think is exciting. It's even 2 or 3 years ago, that the average clinician would roll their eyes on, oh yeah, AI is taking over. Yeah, right. I'll believe it when I see it. But clinicians increasingly and patients want to participate in the discussion. I think the solutions we think AI will bring to health are not known yet. That's what's really exciting. We've kind of tackled some of the things that we can tackle because the data's there. But where the real transformative changes are going to occur, I don't think we know yet. But the fact that the conversation's happening, clinicians are more, I find, increasingly receptive. The market is there, the innovators are there, the research is there, the expertise in Canada is largely there. I mean, that's what I find exciting, and what comes out of this. I'd love to say that a Canadian invented the next transformative thing in health around AI, and I think that's distinctly possible.
That's amazing, Lawrence. I believe it is too. So let's all hope and keep doing the hard work, and thank you for all the work that you're doing on these various projects, which I've no doubt are improving, are going to continue to improve the world, improve the space, and continue to blaze a trail for all that come after. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Jaxson.
You're very welcome. And thanks as always to our sponsors, Microsoft Canada and Cinchi. And to our listeners, please remember to send us your questions, feedback, and community news to info@askai.org. And we'd love to receive them. Love to hear from you. Lawrence, thank you again. Really, really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Ask AI podcast. The sponsors of this episode were Microsoft Canada, producers of the free AI Business School, and Cinchi, the dataware platform that makes integration obsolete. The series producer was Chris McClellan. The series editor was James Fajardo. Original music was provided by Mike Letourneau. To learn how to be featured on our podcast and get information about sponsorship and volunteering opportunities, please visit our website at askai.org, send us an email to info@askai.org, or talk to our bot by visiting askai.org/chatbot.